My sister accidentally sent me a voice message meant for our mom. When I listened, I heard her say, "He thinks we care? We're just using him until he's broke." My hands shook as I replayed it over and over. By the next morning, I was gone, and what I did next left them speechless. I, 32M, overheard my sister's voice message and discovered they were using me. I disappeared, and what happened next destroyed everything they built. The notification lit up my phone at 2:47 a.m. I was still awake, sitting in the dark of my apartment, nursing a beer after another 16-hour shift at the warehouse. My sister's name appeared on the screen with a voice message attachment. She never sent voice messages. We barely texted anymore, honestly. Most of our communication happened through Mom, who lived with her after Dad passed 3 years ago. I almost didn't listen to it. My thumb hovered over the delete button because I was exhausted, and whatever family drama she wanted to drag me into could wait until morning. But something made me press play instead. Her voice came through crystal clear, and I immediately knew something was wrong. She wasn't talking to me. The tone was all wrong. That casual, conspiratorial way she spoke when she thought no one else was listening. She was laughing about something Mom had apparently said. Then her voice dropped lower, more serious. She said he probably thought they actually cared about him beyond his wallet. The comment was followed by more laughter. Then she continued saying they were just milking it until the money ran out. And once he was broke, they could finally stop pretending. My stomach dropped. The beer in my hand suddenly felt like lead. She kept talking, saying Mom was worried he might be catching on because he'd been asking questions about the bills lately. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She told Mom not to worry because he was too stupid and too desperate for family to figure it out. They just needed to keep playing nice for a few more months, maybe a year tops, until they'd squeezed every last cent out of him. The message ended abruptly, like she'd realized mid-sentence that she was recording. I sat there in the darkness, replaying it over and over. 5 times, 10 times, 20. Each time, I kept hoping I'd misheard, that I'd somehow misunderstood. But there was no mistaking it. She'd meant to send it to Mom, probably continuing a conversation they'd been having, and had accidentally sent it to me instead. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. The thing is, I knew exactly what they were talking about. After Dad died, he'd left behind a mess of debt and a reverse mortgage that Mom couldn't afford. I'd stepped in without hesitation. I paid off the house completely, $73,000 that had taken me 6 years to save for my own place. I'd moved them both into a better neighborhood, covering the down payment and co-signing the mortgage. I'd been sending Mom $2,000 every month for the past 3 years to cover her expenses because she said her pension wasn't enough. I'd bought my sister a car when hers broke down. I'd paid for her certification courses. I'd covered emergency dental work, home repairs, medical bills, Christmas presents for her kids, birthday parties, summer camp fees. I'd worked myself into the ground. I'd taken every overtime shift available. I'd lived in a tiny, dingy apartment in a sketchy part of town because every extra dollar went to them. I'd dated nobody because I had no time and no money for anything beyond work and family obligations. I'd declined job offers in other cities because Mom had cried about not wanting me to move away. I'd canceled plans with the few friends I had left because family emergencies always came first. And they'd been laughing about it, planning how long they could string me along. I don't remember the rest of that night clearly. I know I didn't sleep. I sat at my laptop and started looking through everything: bank statements, emails, text messages. I'd been so blind. Every request had been carefully calculated. My sister would call me crying about some crisis, and within days, Mom would mention the same issue, reinforcing the urgency. They'd tag-team me emotionally until I handed over whatever they needed. The pattern was so obvious now that I felt sick. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to give them a chance to gaslight me or manipulate me further. I was simply going to disappear. I called in sick to work, then spent the entire day executing my plan. First, I went to the bank and opened a new account at a different institution, transferring everything except what I needed for immediate expenses. I called my landlord and explained I needed to break my lease early, offering to forfeit my deposit. He was surprisingly understanding. Apparently, he'd been wanting to renovate anyway. I started looking at apartments in a city 4 hours away where I'd been offered a management position 6 months earlier. I sent an email asking if the position was still available. It was. They wanted me to start in 2 weeks. I accepted immediately. Then came the hard part. I had to contact a real estate lawyer about the house I'd co-signed on. He explained my options weren't great. I was legally tied to that mortgage. But he helped me draft a letter explaining that I would no longer be making payments on their behalf, and that they needed to refinance in their own names within 60 days or face foreclosure. It was harsh, but it was the only way to protect myself financially. I stopped the monthly transfers to Mom's account. I drafted an email to my entire extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. I kept it simple and factual. I explained that I discovered I was being deliberately exploited by Mom and my sister, that I had proof, and that I was removing myself from the situation entirely. I didn't share the voice message, but I made it clear that I had evidence if anyone questioned my decision. I saved the email as a draft. I'd send it at the right time. For 3 days, I continued my normal routine while secretly packing everything I owned. My apartment was furnished with secondhand furniture that wasn't worth moving, so I sold what I could online and donated the rest. My entire life fit into my car: some clothes, my laptop, a few books, and a box of photos from when Dad was still alive. That was it. 3 years of sacrifice, and I had almost nothing to show for it. On the 4th day, I loaded my car at 5 a.m. I sent the email to my family. Then I blocked Mom and my sister on everything: phone, email, social media, messaging apps. I blocked their friends too, anyone who might try to reach me on their behalf. Then I drove away. Update 1. I've been in my new city for 2 weeks now, and the fallout has been nuclear. I know this because cousins I haven't spoken to in years have been trying to reach me through LinkedIn, through old email addresses, even through former coworkers who still have me on social media. I've only responded to 2 people, my aunt on Dad's side and one cousin who I'd always been close with growing up. Both of them asked for the truth before passing judgment. I sent them the voice message. The cousin called me crying, apologizing for not seeing it sooner. My aunt was furious, but not at me. She said she'd suspected something was off, but hadn't wanted to interfere in family business. From what they've told me, the story on Mom and my sister's side is that I've had a mental breakdown and abandoned my grieving mother. They're painting themselves as victims of my sudden, inexplicable cruelty. Mom has apparently been calling relatives sobbing about how she doesn't know how she'll survive without my help. My sister has been posting vague messages on social media about toxic people and protecting your peace. But the cracks are showing. When relatives started asking questions about the voice message I'd mentioned in my email, my sister apparently claimed it was taken out of context. When pressed on what context would make those words acceptable, she got defensive and blocked several family members. Mom has been inconsistent in her story, telling some people I'd promised to support her forever, telling others that she never asked me for anything and I'd volunteered everything out of guilt over Dad's death. The house situation is apparently causing them real panic. They can't refinance because neither of them has good enough credit or sufficient income. My sister works part-time at a retail store, and Mom's pension is barely enough to cover utilities and groceries. They've been living entirely off my money. The mortgage payment is due in 3 weeks, and they're scrambling. My sister's kids are apparently asking why Uncle isn't coming around anymore. That one hurts, but I had to remind myself that she'd been using her own children as props in this scheme, always mentioning them when she needed money. The kids never knew I was funding their activities. They thought Mom and their own mother were providing everything. Several relatives have now asked to hear the voice message themselves. I've shared it with 3 more people I trust. The response has been uniform horror. One uncle asked why I didn't confront them first, give them a chance to explain. I told him that you can't explain away words that clear, and I was done being manipulated. My new job is incredible. The pay is 40% higher than my warehouse position, and I have actual benefits. I'm working normal hours. I have weekends free. I found an apartment in a safe neighborhood with actual amenities. For the first time in 3 years, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. I opened a retirement account. I'm saving money. I bought myself new clothes that actually fit properly. I went on a date last weekend, just coffee. Nothing serious, but it felt surreal to have the time and mental space for it. The guilt comes in waves. I was raised to take care of family, and Dad's death had intensified that obligation. But then I remember the laughter in that voice message. I remember the calculation behind every request. I remember how they'd manipulated my grief and my love for them to bleed me dry. I don't regret leaving, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Update 2. It's been 6 weeks since I left. The house went into foreclosure proceedings. Mom and my sister had to move in with my sister's ex-husband temporarily. Apparently, he was the only person willing to take them in. From what I've heard through my aunt, it's a nightmare situation for everyone involved. But that's not the most dramatic development. 3 days ago, I received a certified letter at my new address. I have no idea how they got it. I'd been so careful about not sharing my location. It turns out my sister hired a private investigator to find me. The letter was from a lawyer representing both her and Mom, threatening to sue me for financial elder abuse and abandonment. The irony was almost funny. I immediately contacted the real estate lawyer who'd helped me before, and he referred me to someone who specializes in family law. She reviewed everything: the voice message, the bank statements showing years of transfers, the emails and texts with their requests, everything. She drafted a response that essentially said they had no legal standing, that I had no legal obligation to financially support my mother or my adult sister, and that if they pursued litigation, I would countersue for fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She also pointed out that the voice message could be considered evidence of conspiracy to commit financial exploitation, and that while I'd chosen not to pursue criminal charges, that option remained available to me. Their lawyer apparently advised them to drop it immediately. But the lawsuit threat did something unexpected. It shattered the last bit of guilt I'd been carrying. They weren't sorry. They weren't reflective. They were angry that their cash source had dried up, and they were willing to attack me legally to try to force me back into funding their lifestyle. The family division is now complete. About 60% of our relatives have cut off contact with Mom and my sister. The other 40% are either still hearing both sides or have chosen to remain neutral, which essentially means they're tacitly supporting Mom. I've accepted that some relationships are permanently damaged. My cousin, the one I'd been close with, told me something interesting. She'd gone to visit Mom to try to mediate the situation, and she'd overheard Mom on the phone with someone saying that I'd been so easy to manipulate because I'd always been desperate for approval after Dad died. She'd said I was pathetic and that this whole situation was my fault for being stupid enough to hand over money without asking questions. My cousin left immediately and hasn't spoken to her since. The thing is, Mom wasn't entirely wrong. I had been desperate for connection after losing Dad. I'd wanted to believe that family meant something unconditional. I'd wanted to honor his memory by taking care of the people he'd loved. They'd seen that vulnerability and weaponized it. But I'm not that person anymore. I got promoted at work last week. My boss said I'd been exceeding every expectation and showed natural leadership. I've made friends here, real ones, based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I've started therapy to work through the betrayal and complicated grief. I'm learning to set boundaries and recognize manipulation tactics. I'm rebuilding my life from scratch, and for the first time in years, I'm excited about my future. I heard through my aunt that my sister's car, the one I'd bought her, broke down again. She'd posted on social media asking for help with repairs, but unlike before, no money materialized. People are apparently tired of her constant requests now that the family drama is public knowledge. She ended up having to sell it for parts. Mom is apparently working part-time at a grocery store to make ends meet. She's 71 years old, and that breaks my heart a little, but then I remember that she could have treated me with honesty and respect. She could have asked for help legitimately instead of manipulating and mocking me behind my back. Her situation is a consequence of her own choices. I haven't unblocked either of them. I don't plan to. Some people have suggested I should eventually forgive them for my own peace, but I've realized that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can let go of the anger without letting them back into my life. They've proven exactly who they are, and I believe them. My apartment is slowly coming together. I bought actual furniture, new stuff that I picked out myself. I have plants now. I hung up pictures. I'm creating a space that feels like home rather than just a place to sleep between shifts. It's a small thing, but it represents something bigger. I'm investing in myself now. I'm building a life that's mine, not one dictated by obligation and guilt. I won't pretend this has been easy. There are still nights when I wonder if I did the right thing. But then I think about where I'd be if I'd never heard that voice message. I'd still be working myself to death, living in poverty, sacrificing everything for people who saw me as nothing more than a wallet. I'd still be wondering why I felt so empty despite doing everything right. That voice message was the worst and best thing that ever happened to me. It destroyed my family, but it saved my life.